Welcome back. As you know, I'm Eli, the computer guy, here for the Daily Blob, where we get to talk about layoffs again. One of my favorite subjects for 2025. Now, I know I've heard some complaints from you all saying, Eli, why are you talking about layoffs all the time? Eli, why are you talking about these corporations changing their work from home policies to force employees to come back to work because they know that there will be attrition when they try to do that? Why are you talking about all the bad things going on in the technology industry right now? I bet it's just for the clicks. Yeah, it could be that, or it could be what's going on in the industry. In 2020, I wasn't talking about layoffs, because there weren't layoffs in 2020, right? All these tech companies were hiring tens of thousands of people at a shot for no good goddamn reason. But here's the thing, I was not talking about layoffs, because in 2020, there were not a metric crap ton of layoffs. The fact of the matter is, it is 2025, and there's just layoff, silent layoff, hidden layoff, obfuscated layoff. These companies are just dumping employees, especially tech employees, as fast as they possibly can. And the biggest question I get from my students, from my viewers is, Eli, how do I get a job? And what I want you to understand, right, is macro forces. You cannot fight the macro. The macro forces will either rise your boat or sink your ass, almost regardless of what you do. All right, if you are the best sea captain in the world, you are the best sea captain in the world, and you get hit with the worst hurricane that has been seen in the past 100 years, your ass is gonna die horribly. Because macro always wins. If you're not a particularly good captain, you're out there with a fishing trawler, and for some reason the fish, instead of going this way, maybe something happens and they go this way, so they go right the fuck under your boat, and so you come back with this massive just hold full of fish. Well, guess what? You're seen as a genius. You're seen as amazing simply because of the macro forces. Macro forces will raise you up, and macro forces will crush your ass. And just trying to explain that. Look, back in 2000, 25 years ago, 1/4 of a century ago, I was actually in the MCSE for 2000 boot camp, back when they introduced Active Directory to the Microsoft world. Remember Active Directory? I'm still an Active Directory fanboy. You want to see a smile on my face? Talk about Active Directory. Active Directory. Oh, put a little Outlook in there. Like, oh, I remember Outlook. Anyways. One of the things I was told a 1/4 of a century ago is our instructor said, look, right, this is the technology industry. There are going to be the ups and there are going to be the downs. Literally, our instructor talked about it about a year and a half previously, right? He had been laid off from a job. He had been struggling. He'd been trying to figure out, right, how to get the next job or whatever. Then one thing comes along. He gets a very good job with one company. At the exact same time, all these boot camps, they start hiring instructors. So basically, he had been doing good, and then he got laid off and everything went to hell. He kept trucking along, and then, now it's like a year and a half later, 2 years later or whatever, and he was making like $150,000 a year at his main job, plus another like $75,000+ a year. Doing this boot camp instruction. And again, this was, back in 2000. So he gone from like to about $225 per year. And that's one of the things he talked about. That's one of the things he talked about to us. In the technology world, you have to think about your success on the decade time frame. Do not look at your success day to day, because it'll just make you go fucking insane. Some days you're doing really good, and some days you are not, right? What you gotta look at is on that decade, even year to year. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. The thing is, the tech industry is always gonna be going into the future, right? You go from telegraph lines to telephone lines. You go from telephone to video. You go from video to internet. You go from internet to fiber, all this kind of stuff, right? And so that's one of the things I just want you to understand, right? Understand what is currently going on in the real world, so you can figure out where to place yourself, and then try to figure out what your plan is for the future. But anyways, the real story for today is Peloton. And I find this to be interesting because remember when Peloton was going to take over the world? Remember when we were told Peloton is the future? until it wasn't. Right? Remember COVID happened? That's what I love about COVID. COVID was so weird. Right? So COVID comes through and it's a disaster, right? It's it's a 1-2 year disaster. But the thing is, during disasters there are changes. Most changes revert, you always revert back to mean, revert back to average. But there was this idea that no, this was going to be the future. And so Peloton was one of the successful companies out of COVID because basically all the gyms closed, that type of thing. People start getting Peloton bikes and they start getting Peloton treadmills. They start doing the Peloton subscription service. And we're told this is the future. Gyms are dead. Brick and mortar. Have you heard this before? Maybe, if you're old enough, you've heard this before. Brick and mortar businesses are dead. Peloton, digital is the future. Yeah. Or not. And now we're sitting here in 2025, and Peloton is sucking wind and doing yet another round of layoffs. Apparently, they've done like 6 round of layoffs recently. Anyways, this is coming from The Verge. Peloton pivots to wellness alongside another layoff. So they are pivoting and they're laying off people because, surprise, surprise, the world changes, but not that much. I had a friend of mine way back when I was young and like you. He had that comment. He would always say, "People change, but not that much." I think that's a good thing to think about. Like with the world, yeah, the world changes. Yeah, the world changes. Not really that much. For the most part, not really that much. Anyways, Peloton has pivoted many times in the past few years. Pivoted, pirouetted, gone down the drain. They're going in circles. They are definitely going in circles. In its quest to return to profitability. I mean, think about this. Remember when Peloton was going to take over the world? They are the future. Everybody knows they are the future. Until they're not. That's right. The latest, as announced in the Q4 2025 earnings call, is leaning into health and wellness instead of, quote, just cardio fitness. Quote, with each passing year, we are coming to understand better the importance of strength, stress management, sleep, and nutrition to living our best lives, CEO Peter Stern said during the call. Quote, this creates the opportunity, no more than that, the mandate. Do you like those strong words? This isn't an opportunity. It is our mandate. Anyways, for Peloton to evolve from being a cardio fitness partner to becoming the world's most trusted wellness partner across the full array of behaviors that maximize health demand. Think about all those strong words he's using for a failing company. He went on to explain that the company will focus on health span, or the period of life a person lives in good health. Quote, advances in medical science contributed to the prolonging of life here in the U.S. by a remarkable 40 years, from 1900 to 2020, Stern said. Quote, however, as lifespan has increased, health span, the quality as opposed to quantity of those years, has failed to keep up. People are living longer, but they're also living sicker in the U.S. On the business side, Peloton exceeded, and this is going to be one of the interesting things about these layoffs too, Peloton exceeded investor expectations in all metrics. They did better in all metrics than was expected. It posted $607 million in revenue, roughly $21 million above the top end of its expected guidance. Connected paid fitness subscriptions and paid app subscriptions also exceeded targets, posting $2.8 million and $552,000 respectively. Peloton shares rose roughly 11% on the news, but Stern noted that the company's operating expenses were still too high. So the company has been spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning around. Right now, they seem to have some kind of traction. Right, all of their financial metrics have beaten what the investors expected, but expenses are still too high. Because one of the things I've been trying to explain for a lot of these businesses, right? All it is profit loss. All it is profit loss, right? If you bring in $1 billion, if you're Twitter, this is what Twitter was. You bring in $5 billion a year. Eli, obviously, Twitter was a successful company. They were bringing in $5 billion in revenue a year. Eli, how can you be snarky about a tech company bringing in $5 billion in revenue a year? Because and this is the truth, their expenses were $5.5 billion a year. So literally, just shutting down Twitter would have been more profitable than Twitter getting $5 billion in revenue per year. And that's one of the things to be concerned about. And as I say, for a lot of you employees out there, understanding where your company is at and what their actual financial status is. Just because they've been paying you good salaries doesn't mean they're actually successful. You can keep that boat floated. As a result, Stern says the company will undergo another cost restructuring plan that includes laying off about 6% of its workforce. Quote, "This is not a decision we came to lightly, as it impacts many talented team members, but we believe it is necessary for the long-term health of our business." Stern writes in the shareholder letter, this marks the company's 6th round of layoffs. A little over a year after the company laid off 15% of its workforce and former CEO Barry McCarthy stepped down. So that is the status of Peloton, the technology company that was going to take over the world right until it didn't. Right until that rocket that was strapped to the turkey sputtered out. Right, is now spinning around in circles. It's actually spun around in circles to a degree that it's gotten some traction, but even with that traction, they're doing even more layoffs. And so this is something just to be sitting there and to be pondering and to be thinking about, like with your careers. I get this question, right? So when I have these one-on-one conversations, one of the questions that comes up is, Eli, should I go for like a blue chip technology company, the IBMs of the world, that kind of company, or should I go for a startup company? And one of the things I always tell people is like, well, it depends on what you want. It depends on what you want and what your risk tolerance is, right? If you have kids and you need health insurance and you need to pay the mortgage and it might be a boring job, but you're pretty sure you'll have that boring job tomorrow, right? Getting a job with a company like IBM, well, in 2024 at least, I don't know about now. But anyways, getting a job with IBM probably makes a lot of sense, right? You're not going to get a lot of new responsibility. It's going to be bureaucratic as hell. You may question what you did in your entire career. If Elon Musk came to you and said, write the 5 things you've actually done in your entire career, oh, you might have a hard time. But the thing is, right, the paycheck clears. The paycheck clears, the health benefits continue to work, and maybe that's what you want. Right? On the other hand, you go for a startup company, you go for a WeWork, you go for a Peloton, you go for something like that, right? The reality there is, right, high risk, but you're going to get a lot of opportunities to do a lot of different things, right? As a business, the only 2 resources you have are time and money. Those are the only actual 2 resources you have. So a startup may not have a lot of money, but they do have a lot of people, so they may give you like a lot of different jobs to do. One minute you're doing Node, the next minute you're building servers, the next minute you're trying to figure out how disaster recovery works, right? That is great for an experience level. You know, you're there for 3 months, and that means you're a senior employee, so you get to be team lead, right? You're a team lead at a company you've worked at for like 4 months, right? Like that's the kind of amazing stuff you get. And then if there's equity, like maybe, right? When you IPO, then you also retire, right? You got to be a team lead after 4 months and you got to retire after a year, right? That's the kind of thing that can happen with startups. Or they can explode. And the reality is a lot of times they explode. But the funny thing is, I sit there and I talk with my students, I do these one-on-ones, and they're like, Eli, I hear you, Eli. So what should I do? And I'm like, well, what's your risk tolerance? What are your requirements? What are your needs? Where do you want to be in 5 years? No, those are some interesting questions, Eli. So what should I do? I'm like, oh, fuck. Oh, can I just go back to REST API calls now? That's the kind of thing to be thinking about when you go out there and to get a job, and to be thinking about, are you situated properly now? One of the big things that I want you to think about, like I think about like what is the storyline for different YouTube channels? It was interesting, right? I had Louis Rossman on the Fireside Chat couple weeks ago, and he was talking about that, like when he does his videos, and he's big about villains. Like there's just something psychologically about about Lewis, and he talks about this in the Fireside Chat, that he's really about villains. Right? So when he does his videos, it's about the villain of the story. Kind of curious, right? One of the things that I think about, like, what is the real narrative of my story? What is the real focal point of my story? The real focal point of my stories is always going to be, how do you take agency in your own life? Doesn't mean things are going to go wonderful. Doesn't mean you have full control over things. Sometimes you're in Asheville, North Carolina, in the middle of the mountains, and you get hit by a goddamn hurricane. Like, what? Where the fuck a hurricane come from? Spaghetti Monster was like, haha, your life has been boring. Anyways, right? Does not mean you have control of your life, but agency, that you take agency in your own life. And one of the parts for that is reassessing where you are periodically to make sure you're comfortable with where you are, right? So if this was 2022 or 2023, you got picked up by one of these startup companies that was focusing on, work from home, God knows what, communication, whatever, right? And that might have been the great place to be. Look, I'm in this startup company, everything's going amazing, I got some equity, yes, right? And that might be great, right? 2022, that was fine, probably. 2023, that was fine. 2024, you might have had some question, might be like, oh, I don't know, maybe I feel a little question. But now we're in 2025, And you see this, and you see Microsoft dumping people, and you see Amazon dumping people, and you see AT&T, and you see all of these companies dumping people. Do you still feel comfortable working at a startup company that focuses on work from home products to revolutionize the work from home, whatever, infrastructure environment? Maybe this is a time that you put your resume out to get a nice little job doing backup systems for IBM. Here's the thing, IBM ain't gonna die. It's gonna be cockroaches in IBM. Cockroaches are gonna be sitting there trying to figure out how the fuck mainframes work, right? So, and backups never die, or disaster recovery at least never dies. So, you get a job with IBM, doing backup or disaster recovery for the systems, and that might be the place to coast for the next 5 years. And one of the things to think about, right? There's a job and there's your career. The job is the current work that you are doing and getting paid for. Your career is over the span of decades, all the jobs you have had along the way. For me, right, I started in the Army, then I went into the corporate world, and then I got laid off from pizza delivery. It's a real story. And then I started my consulting company, and then I built that into a real business. And then there was a great recession, and then I started doing videos, which got me into YouTube videos, and now I'm trying to do Silicon Doja, right? That's what a career looks like. And so one of the questions that you have to ask yourself is, are you properly positioned in your career for this moment in time? And that's something that you have to look in the mirror and you have to make the bet. It's always a bet. Eli, what should I don't know. It is always a bet. Even when you do everything right, even when you do everything perfect, you can still roll 100 on a 100-sided die. Right? Anybody actually played D&D back in the day? And the dungeon master goes, I like you, and you got these pluses or whatever else. Don't worry, we will roll this 100-sided die, and as long as you don't roll 100, you're gonna be fine. Look, you roll 100, you're dead. Your character's dead. We got to burn your character page. But don't worry. I mean, you got to roll 100. Click, 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 click. 0, 0. Fuck. Well, you just rolled 100. Give me your character sheet. Right? That's kind of how the world is. Right? D&D is a perfect example of the world. You can do everything right. You can have the best stats going against the weakest opponent. If you roll that 100, your ass is still gonna die. So anyways, some things to ponder and to think about there. So what do you think about this with Peloton? I mean, is this interesting? Like a lot of times I talk about these dead companies, and I talk about the AOLs of the world or Research Emotions, and I realize for a lot of you folks, That might be before you were born, or at least when you were really young. At least with Peloton, right? Peloton was taking off only 5 years ago. Even my youngest of viewers, at least, were teenagers that period of time. What do you think about this company that was literally supposed to take over the whole fitness exercise market? We were all were told, and frankly, I mean, it kind of sort of made sense, all right, that they were going to take over this world, gyms and all that were going to die. And now they're spinning around in circles, laying off people, dozens at a time. What do you think about this? Put your thoughts down below. Remember to give us a thumbs up, a thumbs down. Give us an amazing comment or a horrible comment. It's the modern world of YouTube. All that matters is that interaction. Also remember, silicondojo.com exists. We are having a fireside chat with the VP for AI models over at IBM next week. I do believe it's next Tuesday. So we're going to have a conversation with him about what IBM is doing with AI models, that type of thing. You can go to silicondojo.com. You can become a member for free. You can register for free. Basically, there are Zoom conversations where you are able to ask questions. So think about doing that if you're interested. And with that, see y'all later.